Hello and welcome to Economy 2.0, brought to you by the Silvio Gesell Foundation and the Henry George School. My name is Josh Sidman. First, a word about our upcoming episodes. On Tuesday, September 2nd at 1 o'clock, we'll be joined by Felix Fuders. Felix is a German economist who lives and works in Chile. He's the director of the Economics Institute and the head of the Right Livelihood College at the Universidad Austral de Chile. Felix is also the chairman of the Natural Economic Order Foundation, which is the main organization in Germany for promoting the work of Silvio Gesell. He's also the author of many books and articles. His most recent book, How to Fulfill the UN Sustainability Goals, Rethinking the Role and Concept of Money in the Light of Sustainability, makes the case that our flawed form of money is the root cause of our constant pursuit of growth, something that is obviously at odds with the physical realities of life on a finite planet. On that basis, he argues that it's impossible for us to achieve a sustainable future without overhauling our monetary system along the lines proposed by Silvio Gesell. And then on Tuesday, September 16th at 1 o'clock, we'll talk with Guido Preparata. Guido is an Italian-American economist who currently resides in Umbria, Italy. He has a PhD in political economy from the University of Southern California and a master's in criminology from Cambridge University. He's taught political economy at the University of Washington and was a Fulbright scholar studying international relations at the University of Amman in Jordan. Among his diverse professional interests is the economic perspective of Silvio Gesell, which he's been writing about since the 1990s, including a controversial article in which he essentially accuses Keynes of plagiarizing Gesell's ideas. Interestingly, this is a topic we'll discuss with today's guest as well. A reminder that this show is meant to be a conversation. These meetings are open to the public, and anyone in the live Zoom audience is welcome to join the conversation at any time. In order to do so, please use the Raise Hand button under the React tab on your Zoom toolbar. And so everyone's aware, these episodes are recorded and will be posted on the YouTube channels of both of our organizations. Lastly, I'd like to remind you that you can support this program in a number of ways. First, please subscribe to the YouTube channels of the Silvio Gesell Foundation and the Henry George School. Share the episodes of this show on social media, email them to people who you think might be interested. Also, if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so at the Silvio Gesell Foundation website. We'll put a link to that page in the description of the YouTube video. All right, let me bring in today's guest. It's a special pleasure for me to welcome Carlos Louge to Economy 2.0. Carlos is an economist and lawyer by training, and he's the founder and director of the Silvio Gesell Institute in Argentina. Carlos is a good friend and has been one of the most important people in terms of my own personal journey with the ideas of Silvio Gesell. As I've spoken about before, I first learned about Gesell in 2007 through reading Keynes. His ideas immediately appealed to me, and I asked myself how I had never even heard his name before. For over 10 years, I tried to find someone, anyone, who could help me understand why his ideas are not more widely known. Finally, about 5 years ago, I met Carlos and began working with his organization. Through this process, it became clear to me that there was a need for an English-speaking organization advocating for Gesell's perspective, which led to the creation of the Silvio Gesell Foundation about 2 years ago. So in a roundabout way, Carlos is partly responsible for the existence of this show, since I don't think the Silvio Gesell Foundation would even exist if I hadn't met him. Over the last several years, I've come to appreciate his depth of learning in the field of economics, and he's opened my mind to some important perspectives that I had never considered before. In particular, Carlos talks about what he calls the center versus periphery view of the field of economics, in which he argues that many of the fundamental concepts that are attributed to economists from the United States and Western Europe, what Carlos refers to as the center, were preceded by decades and sometimes even centuries by thinkers from the periphery, notably including South America. Specifically, Carlos views Silvio Gesell as an important link between these two intellectual traditions. In fact, he wrote a book entitled Keynes and Gesell, A New Paradigm, in which he argues that some of the key concepts that are credited to Keynes were previously developed by Gesell. Furthermore, Carlos makes the case that even though Gesell was German, his work in economics should be considered part of the intellectual tradition of South America, since it was Gesell's experiences as a businessman in Argentina during the economic turbulence of the 1890s that led to his unique insights. So Carlos, welcome to Economy 2.0. Why don't you start off by telling us a bit about your background and specifically how you found your way to the ideas of Silvio Gesell and how you see them as potential solutions to contemporary economic challenges, especially in your home country of Argentina.
Thank you very much, Josh. I'm very glad to share this meeting, the work you are doing. And of course, the Gesellian movement is growing and growing everywhere, no? Especially not only in Europe, but in America as well, so that the crisis we are already going through in general in the world, it's an opportunity for us to show natural economy in its different ways, and of course to rebuild this thinking. And Gesell is not only part but the center of the whole thing. So saying that, I can tell you that of course my background is from I am a lawyer and specialized on commercial law and banking law. I've been working in the commercial justice of appeal 7 years, and then in corporate law firms for many years, almost 15 years, and also in banks as a manager, judicial manager, and then in the private sector, and then I get into a software enterprise businessman, a big one that allows me to understand more about software, the thinking of businessman, real economy, etc., so that we can then find a way to not only work in this new foundation and to start up with the Instituto de Estudios Económicos Silvio Gesell, but also with a consultant institution that can develop territory through natural economic tools, mainly complementary currencies, so that we can share then afterwards, during this conversation, some PowerPoints with 5 or 6 pictures, so as you to know what had happened here before. And then also I want to tell you that I was a conventional lawyer, thinker, etc. But then after our big banking crisis in 2001, maybe some of you know that all the banking system collapsed in Argentina, and they didn't give the deposits back to the owners, and it gets into total bankruptcy and insolvency. But not only that time, but before 5 times in 20 years. Argentina is a problem because it's out of the big globalization theater, and we have always problem with the IMF and with the center, with the economic center, and that's what had happened 100 years ago, and maybe a little more with Gesell, Silvio Gesell, in the ending of the 19th century. So that we are used to crisis, and maybe because of that we learn how to deal with them, and some a little bit creative, and we are used to it, although it's not good. And that's why I think Gesell found his thinking, his work, lessons, and even the government heard him, so that that's why we think he learned here, and he has the cultural background in the silver, what we call the River Plate economic thinking and tradition, to get this going forward. I will talk a little bit afterwards about that. That's why my thinking was, what is going on here? We have a conversion law before in the 90s with the dollar 1 to the peso, and of course it gets broken, and all the economic thought was not working. And then I found Silvio Gesell, and of course I have studied also economics, and saw Keynes' treaty, the General Employment Interest and Money Treatment, from here in 1936. We all know. He talked about Gesell, and he talked about barring crisis, a big crisis in 1890 in Buenos Aires. And Keynes talked about that and says that Gesell was there and he found a way to learn about this crisis. That was the way I get to it. And then I asked myself, why Argentines economists don't talk about this, don't learn, don't study, don't teach about this. And that's why we have an important Anglo-Saxon here influence and tradition that not allow us to study the old Spanish and European tradition in our thinking, thought, political, etc. That's, of course, we understand what it's all about, globalization, etc. And then we start studying, seeking, finding, and we also then meet the Gesell family. Felix was know them very well also, and we were lucky to meet them. And then they have a big library from Silvio Gesell itself, the original one, and they donate them to the Villa Gesell City, which is a very beautiful place on the beach. And they have the museum of the Silvio Gesell Foundation, where everybody here are invited. And we have the original library and the books, all the stuff there, and documents, which are very important. And then after that, we continue working with different families, historical families from here. And then we gather all this tradition together, and we rebuild the whole thing. And it's going well because many documents are going alive, and start a new movement here that we need, of course, because we are going now through a financial economy, and we need to return to the productive and real economy, which make our country once big and very productive and very big. And then we change this productive system of real economy productive to the financial, a way like a casino. We are living in a casino in Argentina since half a century. So of course it's not working. We are the only country which has not moved its HDP per capita since the 70s. We have the same average GDP per capita. And we go up and down. And then that's why we start thinking about this. There are many economists working on this, very, very well, important economists, but the media and the mainstream don't allow them to go forward and to work. So that's why we start working in a different way. And okay, that's why we start with this, Josh, by now.
Maybe it would be good for you to summarize the story of Silvio Gesell and his arrival in Argentina, the economic environment that he lived through in order to develop his theories. I think that would be a good starting place for this conversation.
Of course. We all know that he's a German origin and arrived to our shore in 1887 and importing dental odontological machines, artifacts, and import these many goods, and working with his brother in Germany. He already knows Spanish because he has been working first in Malaga and España, His family is from German. He is German. He was German, of course, born in Saint-Vith. Then Saint-Vith passed to Belgium. And it's important, this first thing, because since his father was Prussian and Protestant, and his mother was Catholic from Wallonia, no, in Belgium, which is French background and Catholic French background, it was different families, and they get caught in the war between Germany and France. And we think that this made him thinking about peace, integration, and the way it can be done and achieved. And money was one of the main problems, not only land, which was one of his main subjects, but also gold. The gold pattern was a problem, and he wrote a lot about that. And his first question was gold or peace, and he opposite peace and community against gold, which is scarcity and facilitate greed, etc., and financial concentration. That's why then he developed this. He has two sisters that were monjas. I don't know how you say in English.
Nuns.
Nuns. And it's important also because he has a Catholic and Christian background. That's why he's thinking about Moses, the Old Testament and the New Testament was important for him. And he worked a lot about vegetarian, peace, community, and of course, to achieve that, we need to change our current monetary system, and not only monetary, but also fiscal as work, and we need to change our thinking about workers, the product of war. He says he's very interesting because he has some similar things to Henry George and another European very important thinker and philosopher, which is Rudolf Steiner from anthroposophy, has also developed an economic thought very similar to him, talking about work, personal work, land, taxes, and money, and economy, of course, in a way that it should be in a natural background, of course, with some values and spiritual laws, but mainly in the material organization, you need to respect some laws. For example, usually an interest was a problem, and he discovered how this make big concentrations on wealth in hands of a few ones, and then makes slavery for the other ones. Then he understands how monetary markets work. And this is important. Maybe if we have some time, I can show you a PowerPoint with, we have developed a course about real plate economic thinking, our tradition from South America, from Argentina, which is old. It has 400 years old. And it began from the Spanish Empire, and then the different European currents, origins that we have in our population and traditions that make this happen, with very important economies, books, and institutions, and all in the constitution and laws that I will share briefly afterwards. And that's why we think that Gesell, when he came in 1887, get very friendly and comfortable in the people that were here. He integrated very easy. There were people from all over Europe and different countries. And then his ideas were very well accepted naturally, and with friends, with businessmen in the political background, and then even in the government. And he has his political partners and businessman partners that were have a very important influence on the national government. The president in that time was Julio Argentino Roca, very important president for us, and he changed all the economic program and monetary system through Gesell ideas, and Argentina doubled its GDP in 10 years. And also, although it has a big crisis and recession, in deflation also, it changed completely the sign of the economic growing and behavior. And imagine that Argentina in 10 years, in less than 15 years, get so much gold inside its bank, its national bank, that was even more gold than the one the British government and the Bank of England has in its own deposits in buildings. And it was make surprises. It was like an earthquake in the international monetary system and the mainstream, even in the US. They didn't understand what's going on. Argentina changed the laws of the monetary system because of that, because through Gesell ideas, abandoned the gold pattern and make a big devaluation with fiscal superavit, and this allow us to grow very fast without inflation. Argentina has no inflation through half a century, for 50 years, and the other 50 years up to now, a lot of inflation, because after World War II, we were not well favored with the IMF and the US global new organization. Argentina then get change in its international organization through the productive to the financial background. No, that's why we have this problem yet. These are things that were studied by even not only by Keynes and Irving Fisher, I will talk about them afterwards, but also for German, American, North American, and English economists that came here and wrote books about this and take this information and experience and talks, etc., to their own countries. And then we know that they changed, especially after the Great Depression of the 30s, that everybody takes Gesellian lessons through Argentine experience. That's important because Gesell not was only an idea. This is important, Josh, but was a practice in Argentina. That's why it takes so seriously by the mainstream and the main powers, even the Federal Reserve, the Treasury in the US through John Williams, which was a very important economist that came here in Buenos Aires, and Irving Fisher of Yale University, Keynes at Cambridge, and many other thinkers, of course, in the 30s, and mainly the New Deal of Roosevelt. You know that Irving Fisher, that was the main economist in those times from Yale, he said that he was a humble pupil of Gesell, no? Discípulo of Silvio Gesell. And he was an intellectual author of the New Deal of the US. The New Deal of Roosevelt was driven by Irving Fisher. And we know that he saw the Argentine experience and was in touch with Argentine economists, not only him, but also John Williams, who was president of the Federal Reserve of New York. And then we follow up all the thinking up to Frank Taussig, which was an important economist from Harvard, and he was the teacher of two main important American economists, which were John Williams, that was here for over a year, less than a year, and in the Tolkien's house and library, and studying Argentine economy, and Harry Dexter White, who were the author of the Bretton Woods Agreement, both John D. Williams from the Federal Reserve and Harry Dexter White from the government, Treasury, and negotiate against Keynes in 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement, and both were Gesellian, the American part and the English part. And they, of course, they know to each other very well. And Keynes has a project which was called Bancor, which was based on Gesell's project, which was called International Valuta Asociación, Unión Universal de Cambio, which was almost the same than Keynes, that Keynes and Gesell proposed bonds to compose like a clearinghouse, international clearinghouse between debtors and creditors, and with these bonds that has a carrying cost to make them rush oxidation, to make them circulate, and the international commerce go on. But it was not good for the US because they won the war. They were the winners of the World War, so they imposed their system, which was the dollar one, based on the Federal Reserve, to the change of 35, that we all know, $35 each gold ounce, no? Una onza de gold ounce of gold. Well, but anyway, the multipliers, and mainly this is the point, and I want to share also, is the macroeconomic view of economy, from the real of economy, from goods and services markets to the monetary markets, which was the new thing in the modern theory and economy. Was discovered by Silvio Gesell, and we think that it was put on work in Argentina in the beginning of the 19th century through this discernment that I will talk afterwards. That's why he has so big influence. Then Gesell, going back to his biography, found an enterprise here. He break down like everybody in the hyperinflation of the 1889 because of this banking crisis, which was the first third world financial and banking crisis in history. Maybe you need to know that in Argentina, in the River Plate, we have more than the 60% of the British investment overseas in those times. Very important, because since the US get independent, British influence here was very important, and the investment very, very important, not only from Britain, but also from Germany, France, Italy. And then it was struggling all the whole thing. And then because of the crisis, the government decided to go to the gold pattern conversion 1-to-1, and to retire a lot of money from the market and put a specific amount of money without changing through 10 years. This monetary base didn't change in 10 years. So since people was coming from Europe, millions of people, and the land and the frontier was going on, and the railway was growing, and we have a new town each 100 kilometers, Gesell cried and was he was not glad, because he said in his writing works, that we are founding new towns, new train stations, and getting new people, but we didn't give them the necessary issue, what was money to develop their activities, the tool. We put the towns, the station, the people, and we didn't give the tool, which is the natural, the money that it needs that they need to, of course, to work, to produce, to export, etc. And then we cannot develop. It was a contradiction, and this was for 10 years. And the exchange rate system, monetary system, was appreciation. So the gold was getting cheaper. Our money was very expensive in terms of gold and pounds in that moment. So it was very bad for exports and for developing the economy, not only for export, but even for internal economy, because we have few money and very expensive money and no credit. So he says, okay, we need to change the system. And he was heard by the businessman and the government, and a lot of fight was made in the Congress to pass this law, because most of the financial system and the banks from abroad, the foreign banks and commercial people, etc., were against this law that want to change the monetary system, abandon the gold pattern to make a devaluation of 100 and almost 30%, and then Argentina make its exchange rate better, so it was cheaper to produce, it was cheaper to export, and of course the people that was coming get more easy the money to develop themselves and their enterprises, and the country begin growing so fast that it gets more gold than even the Bank of England in just 10 years. Keynes said that in his books, Treatise on Money, and Silvio Gesell in his books. Not only that, you need to know that Argentina borrow even money and more than 100 tons of gold to the US. The US were debitor of us. We're creditors of external debt from them, because in the crisis of 1907 in La Bolsa in Nueva York, in the New York Stock Exchange and the US Stock Exchange, was a big crisis. And JP Morgan and Argentina helped the US and the banks to recover from the crisis because it were bankrupt. And that's why then afterwards in 1913, the new law, they passed the new law of the Federal Reserve System, no? As you know, in 23, this night of December of 1933, before the First World War began. And they say this is because the system used background of money and banks to avoid a new crisis like the one that has happened in 1907 that was held by Argentina and JP Morgan. So the influence of Gesell was really concrete, big and direct. And the books here, we begin searching and founding from the economic minister Terry and Torkins and some others that talk about Gesell in Spanish. We have some interviews from him in our economic reviews here from those times. And of course, a lot of background. And it's interesting to know, and of course, to rebuild and to understand what has happened, because not only our history, academic history, university didn't know that, but also abroad, of course, in the international system. They don't know where he came from and where Keynes came from, although Keynes speak about Gesell, not only one chapter, but in two chapters. It was the most economists cited, cited in his whole work, in his treaty of economy, and nobody talks about that. And not only was the most named and the most important, but Keynes himself talked a lot about Gesell and said, like a legacy, that the future will learn more than Gesell than from Marx, as many of us know. And nobody takes note about that. Nobody takes attention. And if we think twice about this phrase, we can conclude the following. Keynes, John Maynard Keynes was saying, okay, man, I am not in the future. I am not for forever. Keynes financial system and Keynes system, I'm not forever. After me, Gesell, not Marx. And when we get out from the university, as Felix always says, we found in the corner the capital of Karl Marx, but nowhere is the free economy or natural economic order from Silvio Gesell. Nobody knows what it's all about. That's why you are working here and we are working everywhere and growing to understand what's going on. And then nowadays it's important because we have this financial crisis, not only about exchange rates, tariff and interest and public debt, but also private debt, businessman, etc. And in many places are talking about negative interest rates. That was one of the main proposals of Silvio Gesell. Negative interest rate to make money run. And the more money run between people and businessmen, the more productive demand and offered, supply and demand can be facilitated and work on, and then business grow, work for people, etc. We have this virtual circle going on. And so easy to understand, but so difficult for the mainstream to understand because it's not good for banks. Banks need to borrow money with interest, and all the multiplied banking and financial system is driven and is built upon this apalancamiento, no? How you say in English?
Leverage.
This leverage system, which gets down in the crisis of 2007, 2008. It began with Bear Stearns. Everybody talk about Lehman Stearns, but Lehman Brothers, but was with Bear Stearns, and then disappeared the 5 investment banks from Wall Street, etc., etc. We all know that thing. And now we are in the air today. And because of this leverage, not only by banking system, but also by financial derivative financial system and international banking, etc., etc. So we are going through a new era, no? We are discussing about this, CBDC, etc., etc. That's why in many places are talking about the Gesell, not only in America, but also in China, in Russia. The right hand of Putin talks about Gesell. Dugin in China, they say they are studying the morass about the money. In Europe also, with the new euro in the future, and in the US. So we need to understand what's going on, and it's good to understand the background, where it came from, not only to learn about the lessons, but the philosophy, the human and social philosophy, the economy, and the concept of human being about this. So I have my cellular here. Then that's why I think that we need to talk about this and to have some custody of this, not to go too far away from what Gesell and his followers were thinking about. We have some experience in Switzerland about the VIR banking system and medic complementary system in Europe and the US, in America Latina. And so really we're going through a big change, and it's good to understand where it comes from, where we're going, but mainly what it's all about. So, bueno, this is more or less, he found a big enterprise, which was Casa Gesell, about toys and some mobiliario for rooms for childhood and families, and he was very popular in the high classes. He was very creative in his creations about the stuff in the houses. Then he went to Europe to show what had happened in Argentina, and then he wrote his masterpiece, which was the Natural Economic Order for free land and free money. And in German, the piece was traduced in Spanish and in English. In English in 1926, that we think was the edition that was written by Keynes to make 10 years afterwards in 1936, his treaty on employment, interest, and money. And then, okay, we have this known story, more or less. This is all about he wrote 10 books in Spanish, and some other, his first was in German, in Buenos Aires. The monetary reform to build a new bridge, to the social wealth, and Argentine monetary questions, etc. And bueno, he was totally decisive influence what had happened here and afterwards in the world. But I remember, just to close this part, what Keynes said about him: not only past but future. We need to think about Gesell instead of Karl Marx, and it's very good for us. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, I certainly want to spend as much time as we can talking about how Gesell is relevant to today's world. But before we get to that, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what happened. Why did he disappear? There's a question in the chat asking from Allison, saying she's trying to find a copy of The Foundations of Peace by Silvio Gesell. Please let me know if there's any way to get a copy. The answer to that question is almost certainly no. And that's because most of his writings are not available in English, including his main book. There are some pretty poorly edited editions that are now available, but when I first learned of him in 2007, and I learned of him through reading Keynes, it sounded interesting. I wanted to know more, so I went online and I'm like, all right, I'm going to order a copy of his book, and I couldn't find it. I ended up finding a used library copy from the 1950s, but the fact that his book was not even in print was kind of an indication of of how obscure his thinking had become. There's certainly been a renaissance in Gesell in the past 20 years or so, but I, I'm I'm not typically conspiracy minded, but I'm I suspect that there may have been some coordinated effort to suppress awareness of his work, because you probably know about this, Carlos. There was a publishing company in San Antonio, Texas, in the
Sí, sí.
1920s.
Yes, that's right. And they're really followers of freedom in San Antonio, Texas, where Ginobili, our basket player, was not only the Argentine famous in San Antonio, Texas, but also Silvio Gesell, that have traducing some from Texas, his books. I was surprised, totally surprised that they translate, they have edition and a Gesellian movement in the US. Even
Right.
here, we have a
But
governor here and nobody knows. Go on, please.
you can't find any of those publications anywhere.
Impressive,
Um,
impressive. I find one in the Central Bank of us that says San Antonio, Texas in English. I was totally surprised. And then I understand Irving Fisher was from Texas also, I think, Irving Fisher from, yeah, and also the economy minister of Kennedy, this guy, Galbraith, John Kenneth Galbraith, he was from Canada, but has been bueno, his Texas influence, etc. Go on, please. But this movement has some kind of importance in the history of the US.
yeah, so there was this publishing company. I think it was called the New Natural Economic Publishing Company or something like that. It was very specifically oriented to Gesell and Gesell's followers.
Sí.
And there were a bunch of publications that I know of their existence through YouTube videos. I've seen photocopies of these documents, but I have never been able to get my hands
I saw a book,
on.
see.
Yeah.
25 years ago, when I began with Gesell, I went just only find one and was nowhere. It was difficult to find Gesell books. And one of them was of San Antonio, Texas. Totally surprised. I understand why Irving Fisher and the freedom followers of the long US tradition about freedom were really followers of them. Libertarians, not only libertarians, but the national thinking of the US against the European banks, all that stuff, I think. Go on, Josh, please.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of close that topic, it would be worth mentioning that we are currently working with the Gesell Museum, which you mentioned, and also with the great grandson of Silvio Gesell. His name is Santiago, and he's an
Sí.
architect who lives in the United States, and he's becoming involved in. So there is underway a project to digitally archive all of those documents and to put them online. And so I think the hope is that that will be complete in the next year, and that will open up potentially a huge amount of new opportunities for scholarship, because there are documents that I've never seen.
Sí.
Yeah.
Sí, sí, sí.
So
That's
that
right. And also, Josh, supporting your view, we have a lot of Spanish work from Gesell, never translated to English. So his main work was in Spanish in Buenos Aires. Then he made his second phase in Europe, in German, in Buenos Aires and in Germany, and in German. But none of that writings were translated English. So is not only has no access to the US population, but only for the global population, because everybody talks and read in English. Understand? And even in Buenos Aires, not known Gesell, because we have no Spanish traduction except Keynes and Gesell, that it would be good to translate in English, I think, because not only because of its documents, but because of the story of Argentina and Gesell here and his thinking, to match the US economic tradition to our economic tradition and the European economic tradition, that both are sons of us, we think, because we have a document, because our universities in Argentina are older than the US ones. We have 400-year universities in Córdoba, and of course in Chuquisaca, Universidad de Chuquisaca, in Peru, Lima, and Buenos Aires, etc. So we have all universities, and some of all academics of us, especially Oreste Popescu, make a very important work and found and built what we call the Scholastic Indian, which are economic thoughts from America, from the South America, and first, and it helps to influence the Spanish Scholastic, which were long before than Adam Smith and his books. Okay, The Rich of Nations and The Wealth of Nations is 2 centuries and 200 years afterwards that the same treaty was written in what we call now Argentina by Juan de Matienzo in the north, Chuquisaca, Potosí, in the viceroy, no, Spanish viceroy, called the Treaty of Money, the Tratado General de la Moneda, General Treaty of Money, in 1548. And do you know what has he talked about? It was incredible. About the invisible hand that allow supply and demand get in some way to match the right price. Same words that Adam Smith says. So not only plagiarism from Keynes to Gesell, like this Italian excellent work that I saw was right, but also Adam Smith from Juan de Matienzo, from the same land. Because not only examples, that many examples of Keynes are the same than Gesell, but he changed the name, the pyramids and the holes, not to help working, although it has not value to drive the economy forward. Many examples, and of course the thinking and methodology, but also Adam Smith from Juan de Matienzo and the Spanish and American scholastic here in South America, no, in Argentina, in Rio de la Plata. So we need to talk about that, and even a very important, not only American but Austrian, you know, everybody knows him, Schumpeter, said that if the European economic tradition had learned and studied from Spanish scholastic, we could have saved 200 years of economic thought. And even the Austrian school, Hayek and von Mises, says that his real anchorage, no, origin was in Salamanca, la Escuela de Salamanca School, and in Spain.
Carlos, tell us the name again of the thinker who first used the term the invisible hand. There's a question in the chat. Was it Juan de Matienzo?
Juan de Matienzo, exactly. And the other one that is well known in the same period of time was Juan de Mariana, a Jesuit priest, because it was the Christian thinking, Spanish Christian thinking. You know, in US, you have a lot of cities Spanish made, not only Florida and California, but the whole Midwest. And it was a Spanish place before. It was not empty as we used to think. And then we have this tradition, and okay, and the Indians mix with the Europeans. This is the Catholic and Christian tradition. And they have, of course, its social and economic thinking, naturally, and political, and then the history. So that when we can rebuild this, we have a social Christian tradition, and not only start in those times, but finish in Gesell's work, because the people and the ministers and the government that around him were Catholic, some Protestant. Ernesto Torquín was Protestant, Argentine German origin also, but very Catholic, his wife and all the people, and they want to change this. And so this thinking, I think, and we have some other thinkers and ministers that would be very important books that talks the same than Gesell, like Mariano Fragueiro, our first economic minister, works wrote a book called Public Credit and Argentine Questions, and propose a similar national banking system, monetary system like the Federal Reserve, with 6 different regional banks to measure inflation, credit, etc. in 1853, exactly half a century before the Federal Reserve, but the same thing, but owned by the state, and not private, but the state, but public, with different provinces and the cabinet in part of the directory, no, and the board, in the board. And he says that natural interest rate should be not more than 3%. Bueno, very similar to Gesell ideas. Manuel Belgrano, 100 years before Gesell, about the economic and the monetary behavior of money, recession, inflation, and deflation. And so this was in our thinking tradition and culture. I think that's why Gesell gets so well. And when he returned to Europe, really he get a big impact, because many people read him. And bueno, Keynes finally was very honest intellectually, citing him in many ways, direct ways, and we can then, thanks to Keynes, recover Gesell for us and for the future. No?
Let's talk about that point. You're a generous spirit, Carlos. You tend to want to view people positively. I know this about you through 5 years of being your friend. As you know, an upcoming guest on this show, Guido Preparata, does not have such a generous view of the Keynes-Gesell connection. So I'd like to ask you to talk some more about the specifics of that. But before doing that, I want to read the way that Keynes introduces Gesell in the general theory, because I find it quite interesting. Let me just read the first few sentences. So he spends 5 pages discussing Gesell, and he starts with this. He says, "It is convenient to mention at this point the strange, unduly neglected prophet Silvio Gesell, 1862 to 1930, whose work contains flashes of deep insight and who only just failed to reach down to the essence of the matter. In the post-war years, his devotees bombarded me with copies of his works. Yet, owing to certain palpable defects in the argument, I entirely failed to discover their merit. As is often the case with imperfectly analyzed intuitions, their significance only became apparent after I had reached my own conclusions in my own way." So what is he doing there? Is he being honest? Did he really arrive at his insights independently? Or is there something, is there a darker interpretation?
Muy bien. Well, that's a key question. We are going to the main point. And after this, I will show you, and we can talk about complementary currencies, the Vergel experience in Austria, and we can talk about barter clubs and the new monetary system in Argentina then, okay? Because this is the key point. Which is the key point? Easy to see? No, it was not easy to see. It was not easy to see. For me, it takes decades to understand what's going on. And then we put in the middle of the book, Keynes and Gesell and some other searchers understand this. But the main point was very difficult for us and for everybody and economists was this. Why did Keynes said that it was difficult to him understand up to the time he understood by himself the difference and what's going on, his own way? What's the difference? One, liquidity preference is the keynote of the whole thing, my friends. And we understand that when we use money without interest, because Keynes
Carlos,
said,
can you define liquidity preference for anyone in the audience who's not familiar with that concept?
of course. Liquidity preference is a measurement, technical measurement, which is taught by the tradition of economic thought, especially developed by Keynes, who says that people and economic actors, which means, of course, businessmen, enterprise, corporation, people, etc., prefer to save on money that instead of goods and services. That means that liquidity preference means that we need to save on money, we need to develop and design our economic life around money, no, coins and money instead of real economy. Then it happens that we design all the system around financial economy. And this has a bottom line, which is interest rate and multipliers and leverage, now derivative finance, technology, etc. And of course, then we change the natural economic order to the financial economic order, which was driven by Keynes, not classical economy, but Keynesian economics. Both. That's another discovery that we, the Gessellians, get through, which is that classic economy, English classical economists, Keynes economists are supposed to be opposed, not so much. And Marx economic, not, of course, because they support classic English and Marxist, gold pattern and interest rates and banking system, and the Keynes, the financial system.
Just to interrupt, a point of language so that the audience understands. You're saying gold patron. It's the gold standard is the
gold standard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gold standard. That's it. Gold standard was defended by Marx and by the English Adam Smith, David Ricardo. It was a religion. Although today, gold standard is a religion. We change gold by the dollar, the money. No, the gold standard now it has the place of gold. So. I lost you. Bueno, sorry, that's my telephone. Bueno, then I will then go for it. So my point is that not only Marx and the classic economy are the same, but Keynes also defends interest rate system. No, so please wait me a minute, just in case. Wait me a minute.
Thank you for translating.
Sorry for this. Bueno, Ademar Garcia is a friend of our institute. Ademar Garcia was calling us. So, Keynes naturally needs to defend. He himself was working for the Treasury of England, and then makes a lot of money in the stock exchange system and in the money speculation system, buying and selling different coins and monetary money from different exchange rates, making money. And of course, the system and the banking system needs to going forward, and of course cannot accept Gesell ideas about negative interest rates or no interest rates. So that's why Keynes developed all his thinking and he treats money that makes we can say through Gesell, and thanks to Gesell, the big social wealth that we enjoy during the 20th century after the two world wars, no, and technological advances, etc., because of the money that don't need gold standard. Although now is everybody talking about gold standard again because of inflation and of course speculation. This is a sickness of a good idea. We can find its birth in Gesell's ideas. That's why Keynes need to develop a new economic hypothesis, thesis, tradition, and of course, theory to make this happen in the university levels and in the mainstream in the professional levels. And then Gesell was hidden, no, in a way, and no of his books, none of his books have been translated to English. No, bueno, that's the main point I can take about. I can talk about, no, interest rates and the whole thing, but now it's going to an end. Keynes said, "We are going to an end, man. We need to change the whole system in the future." He was honest twice because of that. And he gave his legacy to Gesell, to all of us, men. Because Keynes, not only Keynesian thoughts, it's modern economic thought. Everybody is Keynesian, especially in the US. That's why everybody's talking about Gesell in some, not secret, but discreet places. But now the central banks are talking about negative interest rates. What is all about? Well, it's good to know where it came from. We are quarreling with this in Argentina and everywhere, and like you, but should be very healthy for everybody and give us a perspective where to go, where we came from, where we can get, and of course, our goals that can be achieved. And that's why our work is so important. Josh, go on, please.
So sticking a little bit more with the Keynes-Gesell connection, you have made the case that the field of macroeconomics began with Keynes, but that properly understood, it should be credited to Gesell. What is the specific concept or criteria upon which you make that determination? The idea that macroeconomics did not exist until whatever,
Gesell.
1936 or 1916 or whatever, wherever we would put it. What defines the beginning of macroeconomics, and what is your basis for asserting that it should in fact be credited to Gesell rather than to Keynes?
Yes, right, exactly. There's one point, specific point, that make us get to this conclusion. For us, it was the same thing. We discovered the whole thing. Suddenly we discovered it. Why? Because he makes a very big distinction. It has to do with liquidity preference, which was the following. He differentiates very well what was hidden, no, back the markets and the classical economy, the famous economists, Adam Smith, Stuart Mill, David Ricardo, Mills, all of them, even the followers, talk about the markets, supply and demand. But no, we talk about money, man. The market of money market. Yes, everybody talk about banks, the different way of banks, even in England, but not systematically. And Gesell, through the barring crisis in the 1890 in Buenos Aires, and the exchange rate between the pounds, the peso, the Argentine peso, and the gold standard, makes him thinking about this question, and then understand that the money markets or the monetary system is a market itself, is a systemic market that is a mirror, exactly mirror of the real goods and services markets. So up to that time, all the economic thinking was about markets. Now it takes care about monetary markets, money markets. Gesell began to do that in a systematic way with a specific methodology, measurements, techniques, and solutions. First time, for example, the index. He says we need to change the value system, which means that things has value because of its gold standard intrinsic value or intrinsic work value, like Marx said, that should be measured in gold, which is a total fantasy, man. This was a religion, something. They say, no, man, what are you talking about? The thing has prices, man, not value, prices. We need to go to the prices theory, not value theory. Teoría del valor in Spanish versus teoría del precio. It's totally different. And this is like a superstition, a superstition thing, this value thing. It's a religion thing. The commercial thinking, the religious thinking, the money thinking about value and standard is totally a psychological and aware thing that we are taken by. No? We need to go to the prices. The things have prices, not value. That's the main change. So when you sold the house, you have not a value. How much it value the house? No, man. It depends on the price that market can give you. For example, you think that your house is $1 million, but if they pay you $850,000, the price is $850,000, not 1 million. That's the correct price. And all the things. That's why we have the subprime crisis and all that stuff. Bueno, doesn't matter. That's the running point, the main point, the starting point of the whole thing. Then we need to follow to develop macroeconomics, which Gesell effectively did. We have a PowerPoint. If you want to, we can share just a few pictures about this to make the difference and where it came from. And I think it will be very visual to the people here to see it. And another PowerPoint that I want to show you is about the barter clubs and the Vergel system in Austria. Maybe it can be useful for everybody, Josh.
Yeah, you're welcome to share your screen. Why don't you save the barter clubs part until we jump forward in time to the present day, since you're talking about Keynes and Gesell. Why don't you start that PowerPoint?
Understand. I want you to show this because, of course, as always, when we can share, it is easy. Bueno, I can share, no? Let me see. First of all, I need the button share, compartir, and then you can tell me if you are looking at this.
Yep.
Yes. Then perfect.
Be sure to translate for our audience.
Sí, sorry. Okay. Bueno, we have this. We are talking about the River Plate Economic Thought School, no? A River Plate Economic Thought, because we think that we have begun with this thinking in the old 16th century, because we have some work of the economists that I told you before. And then we jump to the El Orden Económico Natural, Natural Economic Order, and his influential international influence. No, that's why we say the great discovery of Silvio Gesell in Argentina. We use the Argentine flag because it was the government, etc. Although he was German, and of course we understand that his work in Germany was so important in Europe in general, in Switzerland, etc. Even his political, because his political behavior were previously practiced in Argentina. He was a political very active in Argentina, very much. And then the same experience goes to Europe. It was interesting to see that, very active. So this tradition is a social Christian tradition that we think it came from the Bible, etc., no? But it's going through the main system. So that's what's going on. First of all, I want to, of course, no, just to. This is what I want to show you. We have two markets here: monetary markets and goods and services markets. That's the first discovery of Gesell. And they need to be in balance. If they are not in balance, we have an economic crisis or a financial crisis. And he says, okay, when we have a lack of money, we need to print money to avoid deflation, of course. And when, on the contrary, we have these two flags, both markets can mirror themselves, goods and services and money. We have inflation. If we do have inflation, Gesell says that we need un horno, no? Un oven, no? That to fire all the money, the paper. And then we need only just an oven or a print machine to print money when we need, or to fire them when we have too much in the oven. That's only the two ways that we can not only manage the monetary markets, but also the goods and services markets to get prices level and, of course, work, activity, etc. Then we have markets versus one-to-one. And this is developed in a book of 33 pages that make the general treaty of Keynes, that is very big, just short in 33 pages through this graphic, which shows the LM and IS. IS is investment and savings, and LM is liquidity market. Just you to know, in the modern form of formulation, no, between these two axes, interest and E is income. Bueno, that's why we prove where it came from, that it came from Gesell. That's the main thing we want to share. Another things I want to share with you is this main thing about classic economics, natural economics, and Keynes. It's just a short thing I want you to know. The classics, the English classical school said that the global saving depends on interest rate. As far as we go up with interest rate, we are favoring savings and is good for saving. And Gesell says, on the contrary, no, it's bad for saving, it's not good. Why? Because he discovered something observing that Keynes then take for himself also, which was that the global saving not depends on interest rate, but on general income and personal income. The more income you have, the more money you can save with. Of course, common sense. Common sense. Then we need to make people earn more money and the general income goes up. Then you will have some more percentage of your income for saving. But if you have not enough income, or you have income just only to survive, to buy food or clothes, you are not able to save, then you cannot invest and money, and the economy cannot grow, not only because of consumption, but also because of investment. You need to save to invest, but to save, you need money. But the classical English don't say that you get the Great Depression crisis, not only in England, but in US, even in Germany. You have the hyperinflation, and Hjalmar Sachs first put the gold standard, he breaks Germany, and then with Hitler, he changed. Hjalmar Sachs worked a lot with Hitler, 7 years, and make money without interest. So following the Gesellian teachings, and the same Roosevelt, and Great Britain and everybody in those times, although it was not enough, and lamentablemente we finished in the Second World War because of that. So we need to understand that, and Gesell, he prophesied the 2 world wars because it was gold or peace, and then finally it was gold and war. So we need to change this. B, the interest rate is one of the most dominant measurements in the demands of money and not for saving. Then it's important because the classical English says, okay, interest rate is good for saving. And he says, no, it's wrong, Gesell says. It's good for monetary demand. That's why you have an inverse proportion. The more interest rate you have, upper interest rate, the money is expensive, so it's scarce. You need to go down with the interest rate to make money cheaper, and then easy to invest and to consume. And the classical monetary economy and the Austrian school and the monetary and the Chicago University, even Milton Friedman said, okay, man, we need higher interest rate to combat inflation, to make money expensive. But then this has a big price in terms of unemployment, of lack of investment and consumption. So Gesell says, okay, no, we need to go for cheaper money without inflation. That's why he then developed macroeconomics, economic aggregates, like, for example, index of prices, supply demand, aggregate supply demand, aggregate, big economic aggregates. And see, another very important that is addressed to Keynesian economics and is not for Keynesian economics, is for Gesellian economics with the consumption function. It depends on the income, not on the interest rate. As I said before, the more interest rate you have, the less consumption and function of consumption you will have. It depends on the income. The more income you have, the more consumption you have, and then the economy is going up. That's why we have the first difference between, and this is important as to know, not only for general public, but for Gesellian specific and Georgist people that are very close to us, that we need to difference between economic capitalism, which is Gesellian, not Keynesian, but Gesellian, capitalismo económico, is different, is not equal to what? Financial capitalism. That's our ghost. Keynes and classics equal itself because of interest rate and derivative financial issues that makes them equal. That's the main difference we need to understand. Well, okay, then we have these both two markets. Am I right? Of course, I can talk about a lot of things more, but I don't want to be
Carlos, in the interest of time,
theory, etc.
In the interest of time, I'd like to try to bring the conversation up to the present day. So can you end the screen share?
Sí.
And I want to
we have two more pictures: intrinsic value of money,
okay,
versus extrinsic value. Extrinsic means that the state said how much money values. Intrinsic value is that money has a value by itself, which is superstition for Gesell, because he says that gold has not intrinsic value, it has price. And the money has not intrinsic value, has price also. Interest rate is the price of the money. Then we have this difference between value theory versus prices theory, okay? And then we have then an interest rate versus basic interest rate, which then up to that is usury. Then we have macroeconomics from Keynesian and Gesellians. It's a new technology, versus microeconomic, which is a classic economic school that nobody talks in that way. Even Milton Friedman, they make this, they mix everything so as nobody can understand what's going on really about the whole thing. We need to put clearness on this. Then we have the index of prices based on gold standard and that stuff. Then more technically, external sector versus internal, and etc. Okay, we have universal system versus gold standard international system, and then we have taxes in regime of taxes versus rent system, which is founded on in natural resources and land. We have real exchange rate versus nominal exchange rate. Okay, we have monetary base and velocity of circulation, speed of circulation versus leverage, banking and financial system, interest rate positive versus interest rate negative, etc. No, a lot of many measurements and okay. concepts about this from Gesellian to modern classical economics. So as to be clear, I don't know if I might have been clear or not, but I think it can
Let
give
me
some
try
valuable base.
to let me try to bring the conversation into the present by asking a question which comes up almost every time I have an opportunity to speak to somebody who has never heard about Gesell before. As you have just finished talking about Gesell's, the environment in which Gesell developed his theory was that of the gold standard, and his analysis was directed against the gold standard, saying that gold-based money is the cause of economic inequality, is the cause of economic instability.
Scarcity.
Right. And so the scarcity of money needs to be fixed. The response that I always hear when I describe Gesell's proposal for demurrage is, well, yeah, I understand why that was needed back in the days of the gold standard, but we have inflation now. We have a government that can create unlimited amounts of money. So is this analysis still relevant in today's world?
Sí, totalmente. It's part of the confusion, general confusion. Of course, first of all, we don't need to imprint money. We need to make it move,
Circulate.
circulate. This is es una visión copernicana, es un Copernican change, ¿no? 180 degrees on the contrary side, which means we don't need to continue giving credit and loans to the people by interest rates or the government issuing money because of inflation rate, which is right. We need to have the same amount of money, monetary base, but instead of giving more printing people, we need the same amount of money, but circulating movement, no? How you say? Circulating money.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to improve the speed of monetary circulation so that people need to waste money more rapidly to move the demand and the production. And then the question will be, okay, right, but how can I save my wealth? How can I save my savings? Okay, no problem. You can save through goods and services. You can, of course, buy stocks in the capital market, which is a concrete real enterprise. You can buy the house, you can buy the car, you can buy things, of course, television, and luxury or whatever you want to books, and you can save buying cows, for example, or any production system, and everybody will be richer, no? And the secret is to measure the right amount of money for the specific society and economy and the right speed of circulation to make this happen without inflation and without deflation. That's the difference between the interest rate system and the circulating based on Gesell economics, circulating based system. So that's why the difference between inflation and demurrage, understand? That's why the difference is very clear, not for everybody, but in this way I can tell you should be more clearer.
All right, we've got a question. Allison, if you'd like to join the screen, you'll need to turn your camera on. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and ask your question and we'll hear your voice.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to just ask my question. I'm in my car and I wanted to address that issue because it's a great, I'm glad you brought it up, and it does come up a lot and it can confuse. And one of the things that I wonder, I want to ask if this is a decent analogy. because as interest rates go up and the value of money goes down in the current monetary design, what I see is that it's continuously diminishing, but it never actually dies. So there's this, so I was trying to compare it to like the Harry Potter Voldemort Horcrux, where he took piece of his soul and he divided it up and it never dies, and it just kind of is this evil always living. And so the fact that it never dies, so the quantity of it, the quantity that we have of it needs to continuously grow in order to maintain a value that's usable, right? So we get that value, we expand our ways to try to find more of the money through nature, through exploitation, and all of these ways. That's kind of the evil result of this currency never dying, which is different from a diminishing value of demurrage, where it's just deteriorating until it finally goes away. Is that?
Muy bien, Alison. Muy bien. Exactly. That's it. Very
Okay.
well. Very Gesellian, 100%.
Okay.
That's it. We need the money to die to make a living.
Right.
And then new money should born through our work and of course the factories and products and whatever in the biological cycle, growing, burning, growing and dying in a natural way. No problem with that.
Great.
That's right.
And can I add one more thing? We've had a guest on, Will Reddick, who has a project going in Kenya, and his important point that he'd like people to understand, I think, is through this promise theory that each unit is the representation of a good or service that's coming from it. It's just a promise. It's right. So that not the government's just making it. And I think your point is interesting on finding that balance between the right amount of money that a society needs and the right speed that it travels, but really also who has that power to initiate these promises, what is backing the promise of the government's issue or our own, and each of us having that ability as well to recognize kind of what you were saying before, maybe, I'm still trying to understand, value versus price.
Sí.
Yeah.
Bueno, we
Yeah.
need to make a little bit more effort to understand the difference between value and price. Of course, I understand that because we are teach about value everywhere. But it's just a matter of time to think about it, and that's it. Things had prices, is what we pay for it. It's changed depending on demand and supply. You know, we all know about this. Prices change, but prices change, not value. Okay, value change depending on the price. So price is what makes value live, not on the contrary. That's first. Second, you say, how can we print the money, etc. Okay, it depends on private actors and the public actors. That's more about macroeconomics, public sector, private sector. But mainly the speed of circulation should be the secret of the new civilization. We are equal in a community and respecting differences and etc. The other thing I want to underline about what you said, what I understand, is about exchange rates between foreign money. That's why we have inflation and interest rates. Bueno, it's another measurement that we should take into account in the formula of calculating macroeconomics behavior and index prices, which is not only interest rate, but exchange rate between different coins of national money. That's it, just a concept that I want to share with you. But the main concept is the same. It's a matter of prices, finally.
Carlos, let's change gears a little bit and talk about the practical realities of advocating for these ideas in the real world. It's one thing for you and me and Felix and a small group of people to analyze what is a fundamentally different understanding of the economic process, and to be convinced that Gesell's diagnosis is correct. It's quite another thing to advance such a radically different perspective when it comes to any form of real government policy. And I think that you and I think somewhat differently on this issue. So I'd like to know, my perspective is that the chances of advancing this perspective via existing government institutions is just about zero. That I cannot imagine a path whereby these ideas are embraced by existing political institutions and form the basis of a complete overhaul of our system. And so my personal way of relating to these ideas is that the arena in which there might be scope for generating real results in the world is through local community scale implementation, and that if we can demonstrate the correctness and the efficacy of these ideas on that scale, then we'll be in a position perhaps in the future to make a much stronger case for adoption at a larger scale. You in Argentina, how do you view, what is your practical roadmap for advancing these ideas? What do you see as the path toward implementing what you and I agree is a correct analysis of the problem?
All right. Yes, thank you for that question. Because then it takes us to modern economics and what we are living and experience concrete. Understand that we cannot go for it in one instance, and maybe some people said it's utopian. I think not, but we are on the way. We have on the past the birth of the modern economics thanks to Gesell. So Keynes says the same to the future. So we are on the way, no problem. We are working on that. Of course, the practical measurement and way is, as many of us know, which are the complementary currency system, which is already driven in Europe, Brazil, America Latina, even North America. And then I can advise for a very good book, which is called The Future of Money. In Spanish es El Futuro del Dinero, de Bernard Lietaer. Excellent man, author, and book, which is very clear for people, general people, to understand what's going on about money and community money, social money, and complementary currencies, called complementary but not alternative currency, because we are not competing and we don't want to compete with the central banks or Federal Reserve or the state, because we will lose, of course, if we are in the position of the common people. But enterprises, businessmen can be very well benefit using these tools. And the great, very well case is in Switzerland, which is called the Wirbank, Wirtschaftsring in German, which means freedom circle of economy, that was driven and created by Gesell followers in the 30s. And they have a second money system, a parallel monetary system in Switzerland. And Switzerland has 3 monetary systems, which is another secret of Switzerland. They have not only the Swiss franc, but they have the Virbank, which is another internal monetary system, and they have the international, because it's like a paradise, a black hole in the international monetary system. Switzerland really is a black hole. And you have the BIS, the Basilea, no? Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of all central bankers. And then you have the international monetary system based on Switzerland, not only in Switzerland, but in London as well, but mainly in Switzerland. So they have this, that's why they live so well, no? So wealthy, and because they have a lot of money without interest. That's why I want to underline that subject. Complementary currency system may be the answer of what we are talking about and we are seeking for. And then we can teach, learn, and study about complementary currency experiences if you want to. And we are free to do that, because not only because of private legal mainframe, because contracts and are about right and law, which is based on private property and private rights, and the Constitution that allow us to use our freedom mainly inside the law system. And then since we are free to make agreements, we can do the same with our private monetary system or ways of exchanging, like salt in the past, no, tobacco in Virginia in the US, and you have a lot of experience in the past. Now we can talk then about complementary currencies, and then I want to show you, if you agree, a PowerPoint about our experience on complementary currencies, which was the bigger one. Everybody in Europe and in the text, in the lessons, talk about the Wegener experience in Austria, Österreich, in the 30s, which is great, of course. And then it was multiplied in Europe and in the US. But it was a small town, no? You have less than, let's say, 30,000 people and 50,000 people. And then we have in Argentina millions of people in the barter clubs in the same, but nobody talks about that, mainly because in Argentina it's forbidden, because it get us to a crisis, and the media and the bank at the university don't want to talk about money without interest, because it's not business for the banks. Then since they own the media, the TV and the radio, etc., of course, the journalists cannot talk about this, because then they will not get the job, no? Something like that. We already know, even in the private universities, and then you will not go on, because it's not good for business. Bueno, and then we have the political system driven by these factors. Like, well, okay. Saying that, we can then study and follow the experiences. Then that's why in Argentina, nobody really, just few people and maybe some teachers and some university wrote about this and published, but not mainly, okay? And the Europeans asked us in this book of The Future of Money in Spanish to write down the experience about Argentina, Latin America on money without interest, and we wrote an addenda for Bernalietar, and we summarize this experience, which main pictures I can show you now in this PowerPoint, okay?
Sure.
This is money without interest for communities, and we call it technically worldwide complementary currencies. Then we will share, no, with this button to share. We will, okay, this one, and we'll put this other one, which is, are you looking at it?
Yeah.
All right. Bueno, this is the book I told you about, which is Keynes and Gesell, no? That we recommend to the Spanish people, because not only of the story and the explanation between liquidity preference and the whole stuff, but and documents and our monetary system history, but also we cited literal Gesellian books, so as allow people to read from Gesell directly, straight. I think that we strongly recommend people to read straight Gesell books, because he writes in a way very interesting, very clear, and of course you can then take contact with the source, direct source, which is very is important, enrichment, etc., to make this possible. And 1/4, 25% of the book is literally the main where we can find the source of gains in these literal readings of Silvio Gesell in this book. That's why we make this in a scientific way. Okay, going straight forward. People need to know, especially in the US, in the mainstream, that we have lived after all the banking system collapse. Each province issued its own money, although they were doing this before a bankrupt collapse, and we were living without. We are living with the current monetary system by pesos. We have officially the dollar system, so we have two parallel systems driven by central banks with scarcity and big interest rates, without inflation and big interest rates, and the gold standard in a way. And of course, we have 14 provinces which issue its own money, and then we have two national money, because we have LECOP, which was a national monetary system based on a trust that was funded by the national bank. So we have the central bank peso and the national bank trust with another bond called LECOP, which was national. Then we have the provincial ones, and then we have the barter clubs, which were so important because the recession was so big that it can hold 2 million people working with barter clubs built simultaneously and totally spontaneously by people itself, with some leaders that organize the people to continue living and to survive the crisis, very intelligent, in a community intelligent way, in very well social organized system with barter clubs and notes. And it was almost 5 to 6 million people was favorecidos, were positive favorized by this system indirectly. But you need to understand that we are talking about the 50% of the population living without money. Can you imagine that in the US? 300 million people. So we are talking about 60 million people living without money in the US or in Germany, Europe. You cannot think about that. Even think about that. Bueno, we did it, and nobody talk about that. Everybody talk about Vergel experience, which was very good because they issue the mayor issue municipality bonds, and which was called the free chelines libres. Free chelín was the national chelín and the free chelín, and were worker notes. The mayor and the people who use that bonds in Vergel pays the workers with this bond for each work, each product they sell or they work with, and this note circulates inside the municipality and the region. Okay, and this allow the place to solve the problem of 25% of unemployment to almost full employment, and public buildings like bridges and roads and factories that were made in Vergel with this money. So people in the national wide national system were totally surprised about this and want to copy this in their municipalities, and the mayors begin copying the system up to the time the Central Bank of Austria don't allow this to continue doing this and make a prohibition, make it forbidden, and the same in the whole Europe. And then the Nazi came and the war came because of this recession. That's the lecture we can talk about. Well, this was free money, but in Argentina we have this for 5 years, and in the worst moment. It was really in the best moment. But then the IMF came, the government changed, and we have all the quasi money and barter clubs forbidden by the political and economic system. Totally, they combat them, and really once especially the money from province of Buenos Aires, which was called Patacones, makes the Argentine economy go up very fast and very well, and the barter clubs make people to work and to be happy and to be growing again up to the time the political system makes it fraud with inflation, and they sabotage the system. Incredible. They sabotage with a main action against them. Well, just you to know about this, for example, the acceptance you have in the first line in the nation system level, the bond LECOP, and was upset 100%, and we have $3,300 million equivalent in circulation. Then we have in Corrientes 200, Entre Ríos, Chaco and Buenos Aires had almost $3,000 million in circulation in Patacones, which were not financial. You cannot deposit in banks, in nowhere, just only in your pocket, and you can only waste that, and was acceptable 100%, and makes this so fast circulation that makes the economy move on very fast and very wealthy. And you will see how can even the income and the income tax grow very fast in the national. The taxes grow, la recaudación, ¿no? Very fast. Bueno, you have these provinces, and then you have this figure let you know in the 2001, in fourth quatrimestre, the last four bimestre, perdón, o trimestre, and the first trimestre in 2002, second trimestre in 2002, and third trimestre in 2002. And you will see the percentage, about the barter clubs, the national system, and in the green, the quasi-monedas, okay? So you will see that you have 70% of the monetary base in bonds issued by different provinces, okay? And not financial and not banking money, which is important. The green lines and columns are from money that cannot be taken out by the banks or the central bank or any financial system, because it was on the streets. And the economy of the whole country was working in this way. So you can say that Gesell and complementary currency works very well. That's what we are proving here. Then well forbidden, as I said before, by the MIF and the banks and the government. Then we have this very important figure, Josh. This is the evolution of the barter clubs between those years, okay? So this was, for me, a humanity, una epopeya. How you can say epopeya in English?
I don't know.
Epopeya means like a great achievement of almost civilization. It seems very grandiloquent, very big thing, but it was true, because, as I said before, we have one barter club, in 1995, but then we have all the civil society driven by itself, without corporations, without businessmen, without private economy, without the public economy, we have the state, without the politician, without anybody. Just social free organizations, civil organizations, not commercial, not economic, not financial, not political. And it takes, as I told you before, 20% of population, which was a great achievement. for me, it means that humanity by itself can be driven with freedom, without institutions. This is private property, private law, just one-to-one agreements, private agreements, and it works very well without even justice, just community. So we haven't given yet the value, not in terms of price, the moral value and psychological value of this experience worldwide today. Worldwide, because some other countries has made this in the old civilizations are very common, and today we have many places with complementary currencies. But we need to study more about this because it was a great achievement. That's why the Europeans and Lietaer asked us to write about this in the Future of Money, which I recommend strongly for you. Look, the speed of growing about barter clubs, no? Beginning in the 1995 with a recession, tequila, you remember the tequila? Okay, it was what of our banking crisis that hit us from Mexico. Then we have 17, next year 40, always doubling, 83, 200, 400, and then 800, and then 1500 in the country. So it's important you to see. And finally, I want to show this, that it was published in the newspaper, como se dice, la recaudación, income from taxes from the state. You see the fiscal revenues, no, or taxes taken by the state from 2001 to 2002, and from January 2002 to October of 2002, you have double tax income, man, more than 100 because of bonds. No more need for public loans. No more need for banking loans. Just only speed of circulation. And you can get taxes from that economy activity to then solve the waste, the public waste of the state without any problem, without any fiscal deficit. You have superávit fiscal here. It's another technical proof. Nobody talks about that. And then you have the banking system in 2001 collapsing, and then the tax revenue from the IRS, national IRS, drops down 54%. Okay? And then when you change by the bonds, not banking money, it go up more than 100 and double. Incredible, eh? And this is scientific published measurements. Then we can see in the newspaper apartments sell by grains, by, I don't know, any grains, by vegetable and agricultural products without money, just only seeds. And they say, okay, la soja, the soja, it's a new money in 2002. Many things were buying and selling through soja, okay? And it makes in many places to grow the economy without money. Bueno, that is real, that is historical, really. And then we have this experience not well known abroad, even worldwide, and people need to know that we can live without banks. Thank you.
A term that I have heard you use, which I love, is you describe Argentina as a monetary laboratory. And I think that's a great way of communicating the importance of what has been learned in Argentina for the rest of the world. I don't know why. I'm not familiar enough with your political system to understand why extreme economic instability seems to be endemic for 150 years of Argentinian history. well, of course, excluding the period that you described where there was stability. But in many areas of human knowledge, fundamental principles only become clear under extreme conditions in the physical sciences, and I think the same may be true in economics. And since Argentina has experienced a level of extreme economic experience that no other place in the world has ever experienced, it makes sense that insights would come from there, which simply couldn't occur to anyone who didn't live through the experiences that have occurred where you are. So it's not particularly nice to live through, but hopefully the silver lining is that it is a monetary laboratory. It may be the laboratory from which solutions that can work for the whole world are born.
Yes, thank you, George. That's right. But also we need to remember that it was built through pain, scarcity, and a lot of effort. It's not a laboratory. Of course, we can understand that, and it's the way it is thinking. Some conspirative thinking says that they use us like a laboratory. The white African, they say Argentina is the white African. But anyway, the thing is that we pass through the experience, we have some emotional background, and of course it's very tough, no? But we did it, a lot of people did it, and of course the memory, collective memory, is very bad about that, because the media says, okay, this is a bad thing, is poor, is scarcity, is crisis, but it was a big solution, on the contrary. But most of the people didn't see that way. Of course, we Gesellians, Georgists, that we have an alternative thinking, really understand that and discover that, no? And okay, but we need people we need to teach the people that this was a good thing, that is, we can do it in a good way, because imagine if we can do this in an institutional way, with we can save some instruments and design well. This shows that it can happen well, okay? And so we have a solution, but the system, we don't need to go against the system, and the system needs to help us, no, in a way, because if they combat us, we cannot stay. That's what we learn about this. But this does not mean that it cannot be done, which is the good thing, okay? So that's it, Josh.
All right. Well, we're just about at 2 hours. Great conversation, as always. Why don't you close by telling people where they can find you, how they can support you, and we will, of course, put any links to your organizations in the YouTube videos as well. But tell the audience how they can connect, how they can support you.
Thank you. Here, Alison is asking for the book. The book, it can be bought in Mercado Libre, in Amazon, Repar. It's online in Spanish. Bueno, and okay, we have. I recommend our website, which is called www.institutogesell.org, which is our website. And then I can send you, if you have some time, I can send you in the chats our maybe our some address and directions, if you have some time, just to see that. And we have an Instagram, a Facebook, and we have also 2 web pages, because we have the Gesell Institute, which is for theory science, and we have another one, which is La Banca Territorial, which is for practical science, to build complementary currencies in the territories, because our vocation is to build and help the communities to build their own money or monetary system, because it's a way that we can then help to build communities, because for the future and the oncoming crisis, it will be the best solution for individuals, families, and communities to go through it's coming to us, although we can then find national and international system, we can build our local community system. And then in the chat, I have this website about the Institute, Facebook. We have a lot of documents in Facebook, national and conferences. Then La Banca Territorial, Economía Natural, is for our development of territories. And a YouTube channel, we have even a very important Gesellian Economic Congress, which was the first international, I think, with many, many speakers, even from Japan, España, Chile, Felix, German, and Germany and Argentina. And for us, it's like a very important asset in Gesellian history. And you are invited to see that in YouTube. And in YouTube channel, you can choose subtitles in English, no? And bueno, that's our social. In Patreon, of course, we will be very thankful if you can help us. In the Institute Gesell, we have a webpage where you can write to us. Bueno, that's it, Josh.
All right. Carlos, the Zoom chat does not get reproduced in the YouTube video, so please send me all of those links that you just posted, and I will put them in the description of the YouTube video so that anybody who is watching this recorded will be able to access all of those links.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
All right.
Yes. All right. I will send you by email also if you want to.
Great. All right, Carlos, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to see you. You are an inspiration. And to the audience, we will be back in 2 weeks on September 2nd with Felix Fooders, who is another friend and partner in the Gesellian movement with Carlos and myself. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you on September 2nd.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh, and the Henry George School of Social Science, which are very friends, close to us, to our heart and mind, because our cousins, and we enjoy very much the whole thing that you do in the Henry George School, and we are very grateful of the support they give to us in America, especially in America, because Gesellian movement is not well known there, and Josh, you are making a splendid job, and thank you very much for you, Josh, for everything what you are doing, and thank you very much, and best regards for all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.